The old house on Chestnut Street was an arc of silence, floating on a sea of late autumn afternoons. For Samuel Peterson, each room was a chapter, and every chapter was about Eleanor. He could still see her in the kitchen, humming to the radio as she rolled out pie crust, flour dusting her cheekbones like a soft focus memory. He could hear her laughter echoing in the hallway, a sound that had once been the home's very architecture. Now, a year after she was gone, the silence was the only thing that answered back. Sam sat in his worn leather armchair, the one molded to the shape of his body over 40 years of evenings spent reading beside her. A half-finished cup of coffee had gone cold on the coaster she'd cross-stitched with a lopsided bluebird. His gaze drifted to the window, where golden leaves fell like hesitant tears against the glass. He wasn't just lonely. He was a man living in a museum dedicated to a single perfect life that had already ended. The shrill ring of the telephone was a trespasser. He let it ring 3 times, a small ritual of resistance against the intrusion, before finally reaching for the receiver. Dad! It was Daniel, his only son. The connection was thin, crackling with distance and something else Sam couldn't quite name. A coldness. Dan. How are you, son? Sam's voice was gravelly from disuse. Listen, Dad, I don't have much time. Jessica and I are packing. There was a brittle energy in Daniel's words, a forced enthusiasm that set Sam's teeth on edge. We have an incredible opportunity, a real game changer. We're moving to Costa Rica. A development deal, beachfront properties. It's the big one we've been waiting for. Sam's heart gave a tired little thump. He'd heard of these big ones before. They always seemed to involve other people's money and end in quiet disappointment. Costa Rica? That's sudden. That's how these things work, Dad. The window is small. You have to jump. A pause, then the rush of words that would forever alter the landscape of Sam's life. We're going tomorrow, Dad. I've sold your beach house. The world tilted. The familiar room, the armchair, the cold coffee, it all seemed to slide away, leaving him unmoored. The beach house. Not the beach house. His beach house. The one he'd built with his own 2 hands, board by board, nail by nail, on a sandy lot they'd bought with their wedding money. You what? He managed to whisper. I had to, Dad. We needed the capital to get in on the ground floor. It was a fast sale, all cash. Don't worry, I got a decent price for it, and I've already wired your share to your account. It's enough for you to live on comfortably for a good long while. You don't need a big place like that anymore, anyway. It was just a burden. A burden. The word landed like a stone in the quiet room. A burden. The place where he had taught Daniel to swim, pushing him into the gentle surf and watching him emerge, sputtering and laughing. The porch where he and Eleanor had watched 1,000 sunsets, her head on his shoulder, their hands intertwined. The fireplace before which they'd warmed their toes on chilly Christmas mornings, the air thick with the scent of pine and cinnamon. Every grain of sand tracked across the floorboards was a sacred relic. Daniel, Sam started, but his throat was tight with a grief so sharp and sudden it felt like a physical blow. You had no right. I had power of attorney, Dad. Remember, after Mom passed, you signed the papers. To help manage things. The coldness in his son's voice was unmistakable now. It was the sound of justification, of a decision made and sealed long ago. Look, I have to go. The movers are here. I'll call you when we're settled. This is for the best, you'll see. We'll all be set for life. Bye, Dad. The line went dead. Sam held the receiver in his hand, the dial tone a monotonous, mocking drone. He slowly placed it back in its cradle. He didn't shout. He didn't weep. The shock was too profound, a chasm that had opened at his feet. 45 years. 45 years of love, of sacrifice, of believing he had raised a good man. And in a 2-minute phone call, it had all been dismantled and sold for a dream in Costa Rica. He had been discarded. His life, his memories, his love, liquidated. He sat there for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in on him. The weight of his son's betrayal was a crushing thing. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, something else began to stir in the depths of his sorrow. A slow, steadying current beneath the turbulent surface. He took a deep, shuddering breath and pushed himself out of the chair. His movements were slow, deliberate, the actions of a man on a mission. He walked to the old roll-top desk in the corner of the study, the one he had painstakingly restored for Eleanor as a 25th anniversary gift. His fingers, gnarled from a lifetime of working with wood, traced the familiar grain. He unlocked a small, unassuming drawer on the bottom right, a drawer he hadn't opened in over a year. Because there was something his dear son didn't know. There was something Eleanor had ensured he wouldn't. He reached inside and pulled out a small, ornate brass key. He remembered the day she'd given it to him, just weeks before she'd slipped away. Her hand, frail and trembling in his, had pressed it into his palm. "If the time ever comes when you feel like the world has been pulled out from under you, Sam," she had whispered, her voice thin as parchment, "use this. And trust me." He carried the key to the heavy oak bookcase that lined the far wall. He ran his hand along the spines of her beloved novels, Austen, Wharton, Cather, until he found it, a thick, leather-bound copy of Moby Dick, a book she'd never cared for. He pulled it from the shelf. It wasn't a book. It was a box, hollowed out to conceal a small, locked compartment. The brass key slid into the lock with a satisfying click. Inside, nestled in worn velvet, was not a secret treasure or a stash of forgotten cash. It was a thick folio, tied with a faded blue ribbon. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted it out. He sat down at the desk, the scent of old paper and Eleanor's faint lavender perfume rising to meet him. He untied the ribbon. And there it was, Eleanor's final gift. Her last, loving act of protection. The truth. The folio was filled with documents. Deeds, stock certificates, bank statements from accounts he never knew existed. And on top, a letter, written in her elegant, familiar script. He unfolded the pages, his heart aching with a fresh wave of love and loss. "My dearest Sam," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and I am so sorry to have left you alone. But it also means that something has happened, something I feared might. Forgive me for the secrets I've kept, my love. I never meant to deceive you. I only ever wanted to protect you, to protect us, from the one thing that can complicate even the purest love: money." Sam's eyes scanned the page, his breath catching in his chest. Eleanor, the quiet, unassuming woman who had managed their household budget with meticulous care, who had always insisted on saving a little from every paycheck, had been doing more than just balancing their checkbook. She had been a ghost in the machine of Wall Street, a silent, brilliant investor. For 40 years, she had taken their modest savings and, with a patience and wisdom he never knew she possessed, she had cultivated a fortune. It wasn't an obscene amount, but it was substantial, a sum that seemed impossible for a retired architect and a part-time bookkeeper. She had bought property, blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds. She had built a fortress of security around them, brick by silent brick, all while living the simple, contented life they had both cherished. "I never told you, my love," she wrote, "because I knew it would change things. And I never told Daniel for a very different reason. I see the hunger in him, Sam. The desperation. He's a good boy, but he's impatient. He sees the world in terms of shortcuts and big scores. He doesn't understand that true wealth is built slowly, with hard work and integrity. I was so afraid that if he knew about this, it would become his easy answer, another pot of gold to squander on a fleeting dream. He needs to learn the value of things, Sam, not just the price." He flipped through the documents, his mind reeling. There were the deeds to 2 small apartment buildings in the city, a downtown commercial space, and a portfolio of investments that was staggering. And then he saw it. The deed to the beach house. It wasn't in his name. It was held in a revocable trust, the Eleanor and Samuel Peterson Family Trust, established 10 years prior. As the surviving spouse, He was the sole beneficiary and trustee. Daniel's power of attorney, the one he had wielded with such casual cruelty, was meaningless against the ironclad walls of the trust. The sale was a fraud. It was utterly, completely, legally void. Daniel hadn't sold his father's house. He had sold a fantasy. He had taken cash for a property he had no legal authority to sell, and he was on a plane to Costa Rica to pour it into a phantom investment. A slow, cold anger began to replace Sam's grief. It was the anger of a gentle man pushed too far. Eleanor had seen this coming. She had known her son, perhaps better than Sam had. She had anticipated his weakness, his desperation, and she had left Sam not just a fortune, but a roadmap. A way to teach their son the lesson he so desperately needed to learn, the lesson she had died trying to impart. He picked up the phone again, his hand steady this time. He dialed the number for Arthur Vance, their lawyer and oldest friend, the man who had been the best man at their wedding. "Arthur," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's Sam. We need to talk. It's about Eleanor. And it's about Daniel." Arthur Vance's office was on the top floor of an old brick building downtown, filled with the comforting scent of leather-bound books and lemon polish. He was a man whose calm demeanor belied a razor-sharp legal mind, and he had been Eleanor's confidant for years. He looked at Sam over the rim of his glasses, his expression a mixture of sympathy and grim resolve. The folio lay open on the polished mahogany desk between them. "She was a remarkable woman, Sam," Arthur said, his voice soft. "Truly one of a kind. She set this all up with me about 5 years ago." She said, "Arthur, I hope Sam never has to see these papers. But if he does, it will be because Daniel has forgotten who he is. And we'll have to help him remember." "Help him?" Sam's laugh was a dry, hollow sound. "He sold my house, Arthur. He sold my life with her." "He thinks he did," Arthur corrected gently. "He sold a bill of goods." The buyers, a young couple from the city, were told a sad story about an elderly man with mounting medical bills who needed to liquidate his assets quickly. They thought they were getting a bargain. Daniel forged your name on a quitclaim deed, which his power of attorney didn't authorize for trust properties. It's a mess, but a cleanable one. My firm has already been in contact with their lawyer. We've explained the situation. Delicately. We're calling it a misunderstanding regarding the trust's authority. We'll return their deposit in full, with a little extra for their trouble. They'll sign a non-disclosure agreement, and this will all go away very quietly. Sam felt a small measure of relief, but it was overshadowed by the bitterness of the betrayal. "So, what now? Do I call him? Do I tell him he's a fool and a thief?" Arthur leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You could. Or you could follow the path Eleanor laid out." "She didn't lay out a path. She just left the documents." "Oh, she did, Sam. Believe me," Arthur said with a knowing smile. "Between the lines. She wanted you to protect the assets, yes. But more than that, she wanted you to save your son. And you can't save a drowning man by simply telling him he's in the water. Sometimes you have to let him feel the cold. You have to let him realize he can't breathe before he'll ever accept a lifeline." The words settled over Sam, heavy and resonant with a truth he couldn't deny. A direct confrontation would only ignite Daniel's pride. He would become defensive, angry, and the chasm between them would become a canyon. But silence had its own power. "What do you want me to do, Sam?" Arthur asked. "I am your lawyer. I will do whatever you instruct. We can freeze his accounts. We can file charges." Sam looked out the window at the bustling city below. He thought of Daniel as a little boy, his hand tucked firmly in his, trusting him completely. He thought of Eleanor's words. He needs to learn the value of things. "No," Sam said, his voice finding a new strength. "We do nothing. We let the sale fail. We let the money he thinks he has vanish. We let him go to Costa Rica. And we wait." "And you?" Arthur asked. "What will you do?" A plan, cold and clear, began to form in Sam's mind. A performance. A fiction that would have to become his reality for a time. I'm going to be the man he thinks I am. A poor widower, abandoned by his only son. I'll sell my car. I'll move out of the house on Chestnut Street and rent a small apartment. I will become the victim he created. Arthur raised an eyebrow. That's a difficult role to play. It's the only one that will work, Sam said. He has to believe it. Everyone has to believe it. When he falls, and he will fall, he has to believe I have nothing to offer him but a place on my threadbare couch. He has to come back not for a bailout, but for a father. And so, the quiet architect, the man who had spent his life building solid, dependable structures, began the strange and painful task of deconstructing his own life. The first step was leaving the house on Chestnut Street. Each box he packed was a fresh torment. Eleanor's clothes, still smelling of her, were folded and given to a local women's shelter. The good china, used for countless holiday dinners, was wrapped in newspaper and put into storage. He moved with the grim efficiency of a man dismantling a stage set. His neighbors watched with pitying eyes. Carol, from next door, brought over a casserole, her face etched with concern. "Oh, Sam, I heard. Daniel in Costa Rica. And selling the house. I can't believe it. Are you going to be all right?" "I'll be fine, Carol," he said, forcing a weary smile. "Just need to downsize. Less to worry about." He played the part, feeling the weight of their sympathy like a shroud. He found a small one-bedroom apartment above a bakery in a quieter part of town. It was clean but anonymous, with beige walls and cheap linoleum floors that felt cold under his feet even in socks. It smelled of sugar and yeast from the shop below, a constant, cloying reminder of a sweetness that felt worlds away. He sold his old, reliable sedan to a college kid for a few $1,000s and started taking the bus. The days bled into one another, a monochrome of grief and resolve. He would walk through the city parks, watching families, a ghost at their feast. He would sit in cheap diners, nursing a single cup of coffee for hours, listening to the chatter of lives that were still moving forward. He was living a lie, but the loneliness was real. The pain was real. In playing the part of a man who had lost everything, he felt the full, crushing weight of what his son had tried to take from him. He kept the folio from Eleanor in a safe deposit box, visiting it once a week like a pilgrim to a shrine. He would read her letter again and again, drawing strength from her words, from her unwavering love and her painful, prescient wisdom. One afternoon, sitting on a park bench, he was feeding pigeons the last of a stale biscuit when he found himself looking through an old photo album he'd brought from the house. There was a faded picture of Eleanor, radiant, holding a squirming, laughing baby Daniel. Another of a 5-year-old Daniel on Sam's shoulders at the beach, his face alight with pure joy. The images were like small, perfect windows into a world that no longer existed. He traced the outline of his wife's face with his thumb, a familiar ache blooming in his chest. He thought about the intricate hidden dramas that played out behind the closed doors of every family. The secret sacrifices, the unspoken fears, the deep, complicated currents of love and resentment that shaped every life. These were the real stories, weren't they? The ones that truly mattered, the ones that were etched onto the heart. If you love hearing stories like this, stories that feel like pieces of real life, you might want to subscribe to our channel. There are more waiting for you. He closed the album, the past sealed away once more. He had made his decision. He had chosen his path. Now, all he could do was wait for the inevitable phone call. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. Sam heard nothing. The silence from Costa Rica was absolute. He settled into the rhythm of his new, solitary life. He learned the bus schedules by heart. He knew which cashiers at the grocery store would smile and which would not. He became a regular at the local library, losing himself in books on history and astronomy, anything to quiet the anxious hum in his mind. He spoke with Arthur every week. The lawyer handled the trust's business with quiet efficiency. The rent checks from the apartment buildings and the commercial space were deposited. The investment portfolio grew. On paper, Sam was a wealthy man. In his small apartment, he was eating canned soup and toast for dinner, mending a hole in his favorite sweater. The duality of his existence was a strange, lonely burden. The first crack in the silence came not from Daniel, but from his wife, Jessica. She called one Tuesday evening, her voice small and tight with unshed tears. "Sam, it's Jessica. Jessica, how are you? How's Costa Rica?" He kept his tone even, betraying nothing. "Oh, Sam," she began, and then he heard a sob she quickly tried to stifle. It's not what we expected." He waited. "The investment," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if she were afraid of being overheard. "It wasn't real. The land, the permits, it was all a scam. The developer, he's gone. And so is the money. All of it." Sam closed his eyes. He felt no triumph, only a deep, weary sadness. "I'm sorry to hear that, Jessica. We're stuck here, Sam. Our visas are about to expire. We have no money for tickets home. Daniel, he's not taking it well. He's so angry, and so ashamed. He won't let me call you. He told me not to." Another choked sob. "But I didn't know who else to turn to. We're in so much trouble. What does he plan to do?" Sam asked, his voice gentle. "I don't know. He just walks on the beach for hours. He won't talk about it. He just keeps saying he'll figure something out." Her voice was laced with a panic she could no longer conceal. "But there's nothing to figure out. We have nothing left." "You tell him," Sam said slowly, deliberately, "that his father is here. You tell him that when he's ready to talk, he can call me." He hung up, his heart heavy. The first domino had fallen. Another week passed. Then, late one night, the phone rang. Sam knew before he answered. "Dad!" The voice was unrecognizable. The brittle confidence was gone, replaced by a hollow, defeated rasp. It was the voice of a man who had stared into the abyss and found nothing looking back. "Daniel," Sam said. There was a long silence, filled with the static of a poor international connection and the heavier static of shame. "She told you," Daniel finally said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes. I messed up, Dad. I messed up so bad." The words came out in a rush, a torrent of confession. "It was all lies. The whole thing. I was so sure. I thought this was it. I thought I could finally be someone you'd be proud of." The irony was a bitter pill. "I was always proud of you, Daniel. I was proud of the boy I raised. The man you were supposed to be." A raw, broken sound came through the receiver, the sound of a man weeping. "I lost everything. The money from the house. Everything. We're broke. We're going to be deported next week if we can't get a flight. Dad, I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go." The last of his pride crumbled. Can we come home? Can we stay with you? Just for a little while. Until I get back on my feet." This was the moment. The culmination of months of painful waiting. Sam could have reminded him that there was no house money. He could have unleashed the torrent of his anger and hurt. But he heard Eleanor's voice in his mind, clear as a bell. "Save your son." "There's not much room here, Daniel," he said, his voice imbued with a believable weariness. "It's just a small place. But there's a pull-out couch. It's not much, but it's yours if you need it." "Thank you, Dad," Daniel whispered, his voice thick with relief and shame. "Thank you. I'll pay you back. I swear. Every penny." "Just come home, son," Sam said, and hung up the phone. He went to the window and looked out at the quiet, sleeping street. The bakery below was dark. The lie was almost over. The hardest part was yet to come. The reunion at the airport was a study in quiet devastation. Daniel was thinner, his face gaunt and sunburnt, his eyes shadowed with a deep, haunted exhaustion. Jessica looked simply broken, her shoulders slumped in defeat. They carried 2 small, battered suitcases between them, all that was left of their grand Costa Rican dream. There were no hugs. Daniel couldn't meet his father's eyes. He stared at the floor, the scuffed tiles, his own worn-out shoes, anywhere but at the face of the man he had so profoundly wronged. The bus ride to the apartment was silent and suffocating. Sam watched the familiar streets of his city roll by, a place his son no longer seemed to recognize. When they arrived, Daniel and Jessica stood in the doorway of the small, drab apartment, their expressions a mixture of shock and pity. This was where their actions had driven him. This small, sad room was the consequence of their ambition. The reality of it seemed to hit Daniel harder than anything else had. "This is it," Sam said simply, gesturing to the cramped living space. "Home sweet home." For 2 weeks, they lived like ghosts in the tiny apartment. Daniel slept on the lumpy pull-out couch, Jessica on a small cot Sam had bought at a thrift store. During the day, Daniel would leave, walking the city for hours, returning only after dark, his face set in a grim mask. He was looking for work, but his confidence was shattered. He was a man in his late 40s with a string of failed ventures and a resume full of holes. The shame was a physical presence in the small rooms, thick and unbreathable. Sam was patient. He made them simple meals. He didn't ask questions. He didn't lecture or judge. He simply existed alongside them in their shared misery, his quiet presence a constant, gentle reproach. He was letting the cold seep into his son's bones. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Sam came home from the library to find Daniel sitting at the small kitchen table, his head in his hands. A stack of overdue bills and final notices from his failed startup were spread out before him. "They're suing me," Daniel said, his voice flat. "The landlord for my old office space. For back rent. They're going to garnish my wages, if I ever manage to get any." He looked up at Sam, his eyes filled with a despair so complete it was terrifying. "It's over. I'll never get out from under this. I've ruined my life. I've ruined Jessica's life. And I've ruined yours." Sam pulled out a chair and sat down opposite him. The time for silence was over. "There's something we need to do," Sam said calmly. "Something I should have done when you first got back." He stood up. "Get your coat. We're going for a drive." "A drive? Dad, I don't." "Get your coat, Daniel." Sam borrowed Carol's car from next door, a kindness he had arranged earlier that day. He drove them out of the city, heading east along the old highway. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, silent and confused, as the familiar landscape of strip malls and suburbs gave way to pine forests and salt marshes. Jessica sat in the back, a nervous, silent observer. After an hour, Daniel finally spoke. "Where are we going?" Sam didn't answer. He just kept driving, his eyes on the road. Finally, he turned onto a narrow sandy lane bordered by sea grass and twisted scrub oaks. And there it was. At the end of the lane, just as it had for 50 years, stood the beach house. Its gray, weathered shingles glowed in the soft afternoon light, the windows watching them like calm, knowing eyes. A thin curl of smoke rose from the stone chimney. Daniel stared, his mouth agape. "What is this? Who's living here? Dad, what's going on?" Sam pulled the car to a stop but didn't get out. He turned to his son. "The sale never went through, Daniel." Daniel's face was a canvas of confusion. "What do you mean?" "I got the money. I signed the papers." "The papers you signed were meaningless," Sam said, his voice steady and even, each word landing with calculated weight. "You didn't have the authority to sell. The house wasn't in my name. It was in a trust. A trust your mother set up years ago to protect it. To protect us." He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the leather folio. He didn't need to open it. He knew it by heart. Your mother was a very smart woman, Daniel. She saw this coming. She saw your desperation. She knew that one day you might do something reckless. So she made sure that the things that truly mattered were protected. He told him everything. About Eleanor's secret investments. About the properties, the portfolio, the quiet fortune she had built. About the trust that had rendered Daniel's grand betrayal null and void. He explained the charade of the past few months. The apartment, the sold car, the life of feigned poverty. Daniel sat in stunned silence, the color draining from his face. Jessica gasped from the back seat, her hand flying to her mouth. This wasn't just about a failed house sale. This was about a truth so profound it reshaped their entire reality. It was about a mother's love that reached beyond the grave, a father's painful, patient plan, and his own catastrophic blindness. The landlord who's suing you for back rent on your office? Sam said, his voice softening slightly. The building is owned by the trust. That's our building, Daniel. The blow was final. Daniel's entire narrative of his life, his struggles, his victimhood, his one big score that had gone wrong, it all collapsed into a pile of ash. He hadn't been fighting against a cruel world. He had been fighting against the loving, protective embrace of the parents he had betrayed. He finally looked at his father, and for the first time, he truly saw him. He saw the grief and the pain in his eyes, but underneath it, he saw an immense, unshakable strength. And he saw love. A difficult, complicated, and unconditional love. Tears streamed down Daniel's face. They were not the tears of a man who had lost his money, but of a man who had just found his soul. "Why?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why would you do all this? Why let me fail so completely? Why live in that horrible apartment? You could have just told me." "Because you wouldn't have learned anything," Sam said, his own eyes welling up. "I would have been the bank, and you would have been the debtor. You would have resented me for the rescue, and I would have resented you for needing it. Your mother knew. The only way for you to understand the value of a home was to lose it. The only way for you to appreciate what you had was to believe it was gone forever. I didn't do it to punish you, son. I did it to save you." Sam got out of the car. He walked to the front door of the beach house and unlocked it. He pushed it open and stood there, waiting. Daniel and Jessica slowly got out of the car and walked up the sandy path. They stopped at the doorway, hesitating on the threshold of a life they had thrown away and had now been miraculously given back. They stepped inside. The house smelled of wood smoke and salt and lemon oil, the timeless scent of home. Nothing was changed. The same hand-hooked rugs were on the floor. The same collection of seashells lined the mantelpiece. On the wall were the pencil marks tracking Daniel's height, from a small boy up to a man who had somehow lost his way. It was all there. It had been there all along, waiting for him. Daniel turned to his father, his face a ruin of shame and gratitude. The pride that had driven him for so long was gone, shattered into a million pieces. In its place was a raw, humbling remorse. "I'm sorry," he said, the words torn from the very core of his being. "Dad, I am so sorry." "I know," Sam said, and for the first time in a very long time, he pulled his son into his arms. The months that followed were not about miracles, but about the slow, arduous work of rebuilding. There were no grand gestures of forgiveness, but a series of small, quiet moments that began to mend the broken trust. Forgiveness wasn't a gift Sam could give. It was a home Daniel had to build for himself, one honest day at a time. Sam did not offer a handout. The fortune Eleanor had built was a safety net, not a hammock. He laid out the terms with the quiet authority of a man who had earned the right to do so. "The trust will settle the debts from your startup," he told Daniel one evening as they sat on the porch of the beach house, the waves hissing against the shore. "Consider it a final loan from your mother. But it's the last one. From now on, you earn your way." He offered Daniel a job. Not as an executive or a partner, but as a property manager for the trust's holdings. It was a job of fixing leaky faucets in the apartment buildings, of negotiating with painters for the commercial space, of mowing the lawn at the beach house. It was humble, hands-on work. It was a job that required calluses, not shortcuts. To Sam's quiet relief, Daniel accepted without hesitation. The work seemed to ground him. The simple, tangible act of fixing something that was broken became a metaphor for his own life. He started waking up early. The haunted look in his eyes was slowly replaced by the clear-eyed focus of a man with a purpose, however modest. Jessica, free from the weight of their financial ruin, found her own footing. She had been a second-grade teacher before she'd been swept up in Daniel's whirlwind of ambition. She took a job as a teacher's aide at a local elementary school, finding a quiet joy in the chaotic, hopeful world of children. They moved into one of the trust's smaller apartments, a simple two-bedroom place, and they paid their rent on the first of every month. Life settled into a new, fragile rhythm. Sam moved back into the house on Chestnut Street, but he spent most of his weekends at the beach house. Often, Daniel would be there, working on some project, restaining the deck, repairing the shingles on the roof that a winter storm had loosened. They worked together, side by side, mostly in a comfortable silence. The air between them was no longer thick with unspoken things. The truth was out, and in its clean, stark light, they were slowly finding their way back to each other. They didn't talk about the betrayal. They didn't need to. It was there, a scar on their history, but it was a scar that was beginning to fade, covered over by the new skin of daily routines and shared purpose. One Saturday afternoon in late spring, Sam was on the porch, reading, while Daniel was carefully tending to the small garden of beach roses Eleanor had planted years ago. He moved with a patience Sam had never seen in him before, gently pruning the dead wood, his hands, once soft from typing on a keyboard, now steady and capable in the dirt. He looked up and caught his father's eye, offering a small, genuine smile. It was a smile without artifice, without the desperate need for approval that had once defined him. It was just a smile. A moment of peace. Sam felt a warmth spread through his chest. He looked out at the ocean, the endless blue meeting the endless sky. The grief for Eleanor was still there, a constant low hum beneath the surface of his days. It always would be. But it was no longer a drowning sorrow. It was a companion, a presence. He felt her there with him on the porch, her head on his shoulder, her quiet pride filling the space between them. The pain of his son's actions had not been erased, but it had been transformed. It had become the hard-won foundation of something new, something more honest and real than what they'd had before. It was a quiet redemption, playing out not in dramatic speeches, but in the simple, faithful turning of the seasons. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of orange and violet. The scent of the salt and the roses mingled in the cooling air. The sound of the waves was a gentle, rhythmic breath, a lullaby the world had been singing long before he was born, and would continue to sing long after he was gone. He was just a small part of it all, a man on a porch, watching his son find his way home. And for now, that was enough. It was more than enough.